Good afternoon. I'm Melanie White, President of the Women's Club. Thank you so much for being here today. Welcome to members in the auditorium and welcome to our members viewing online. We appreciate your attendance today. You're in for a really great education. Following today's program, please join us in the Halsey Hall to meet Dr. Susan Hong. Please silence your cell phones. Get in your purse. Nobody had their cell phone go off last week. We did really great. Let's do it again this week. Our special events committee members have planned some good times to share together as we gather in small groups. Sign up for a day trip to the Ann Spencer House and Garden Museum and Poplar Forest on April 2nd. The registration deadline is today, March 2nd. Bring a friend interested in joining the Women's Club to our Become a Member luncheon on April 6th at 11 a.m. Our annual business meeting and luncheon is April 13th. The registration deadline is April 2nd. Please fill out the form sent to you via email that requests your updated volunteer interests and membership updates by March 2nd. This is today, so you can go home and still do this. Thank you to the volunteer committee for providing our refreshments today. Thank you to Betty Crutcher for so graciously serving as our chair of today. Betty will now introduce our speakers.
Thank you, Margaret, and good afternoon. Let's see, you're a little taller than I am. Can you hear me very well? Yes. Okay. My appreciation also goes to our executive director, Sally G. Swithers, and the program committee members for inviting our special guest today. Again, we welcome you all, virtually and in person. Our distinguished speaker, Dr. Robert Winn, has served since 2019 as the director of Virginia Commonwealth University Massey Comprehensive Cancer Center, designated by the National Cancer Institute, which provides advanced cancer care, conducts groundbreaking research to discover new therapies, offers high-quality education and training, and engages with the community to make advancements in cancer treatment and prevention equally available to all. At VCU Medical School, Dr. Winn also holds the Lippman Chair in Oncology. We congratulate Dr. Winn on his recent appointment to the Cancer Grand Challenges Global Research Initiative, a partnership between the National Cancer Institute and Cancer Research UK. This forum is set to take place in London on tomorrow, March 3rd, where Dr. Winn's presence is required. He will join us virtually today, and his colleague, Dr. Susan Hong, will provide questions. You will provide the questions, and she will provide the answers. Dr. Susan Hong is the director of the Cancer Survivorship Program at VCU Massey Comprehensive Cancer Center and an associate professor in the Division of Hematology, Oncology, and Palliative Care at the VCU School of Medicine. It is no coincidence that we gather here today with these two remarkable physicians, for it is the very mission of the Women's Club to educate, inspire, and engage. And I can think of no better way to fulfill that mission than through conversations that have the power to cure and to save lives. We are grateful and honored to welcome them both. Lastly, for those interested in learning more about their distinguished careers, please see last Friday's e-update for more detailed information. Thank you.
First of all, I'd like to say hello and really thank you for this invitation. And I am so sorry that I can't be here with you in person. I would say that to the organizers of this meeting and actually to just the group in general, when I think of strong, powerful women that get things done, you are it. So again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to share with you what I'm going to speak about today, which is women's health, a cancer update. For those of you who don't know, I'm Dr. Robert Winn. I am the current Cancer Center Director of the VCU Massey Comprehensive Cancer Center. And one of my proudest moments has been not only to be a supporter of clubs like you and Women in Wellness, but really a supporter of all of the good works that we've been doing here at Massey, and understanding that it's not just the doctors, it's not the nurses, it's not just the researchers, it's all of us. And I want to thank you for that. I'm going to go to my next slide, which is just a quick disclosure slide, just to say that I don't have anything to disclose for this particular talk. And so I'd like to get started with the following slide. This is an example of what I think is a struggle in science. And it really is between Lord Kelvin and Albert Einstein, two of the most smartest men I think I know. Lord Kelvin comes from the camp of to measure is to know. If you cannot measure it, you cannot improve it. Having said that, Albert Einstein, who in his own right was probably one of the most brilliant human beings that existed on the planet, also said that not everything that counts can be counted. And not everything that can even be counted actually counts. So when we think of the field of medicine, and when I think of the field of science and of the applied science of medicine, I'm really caught between these bookends of ensuring that the data that we collect is meaningful and we can measure it, but understanding that even in science, there's some limitations to our metrics and our outcomes. Ensuring that the data that we collect is meaningful and we can measure it, but understanding that even in science, there's some limitations to our metrics and our outcomes. Like you and Women in Wellness, but really a supporter of all of the good works that we've been doing here at Massey, and understanding that it's not just the doctors, it's not the nurses, it's not just the researchers, it's all of us. And I want to thank you for that. I'm going to go to my next slide, which is just a quick disclosure slide, just to say that I don't have anything to disclose for this particular talk. And so I'd like to get started with the following slide. This is an example of what I think is a struggle in science. And it really is between Lord Kelvin and Albert Einstein, two of the most smartest men I think I know. Lord Kelvin comes from the camp of to measure is to know. If you cannot measure it, you cannot improve it. Having said that, Albert Einstein, who in his own right was probably one of the most brilliant human beings that existed on the planet, also said that not everything that counts can be counted. And not everything that can even be counted actually counts. So when we think of the field of medicine, and when I think of the field of science and of the applied science of medicine, I'm really caught between these bookends of ensuring that the data that we collect is meaningful and we can measure it, but understanding that even in science, there's some limitations to our metrics and our outcomes. It's within that I'd like to actually tell you where I think we have a disconnect in the United States. These are data that come from an NIH report, National Institutes of Health report, about a year back or so, where we identified the big disconnect. And what is that? 1 in 2 or 1 in 3 men now will have cancer in their lifetime. 1 in 3 women will have cancer in their lifetime. But when they asked a large number of Americans from various different regions and various different backgrounds, if they thought that they, on a personal level, they themselves would essentially get cancer in their lifetime, 74% said no. Now, I don't know too much math, but I know that those numbers aren't aligned. And as my grandfather would say, that math ain't mathing. Now, in part, why is that? I think we have not done a very good job of talking to our communities, connecting to our communities, and telling them the real story. And one of the things I would like to do today, particularly in the Cancer Update for Women, is to give you also not only the facts and the data, but the history that women have always been involved with their thumbprint in directing our trajectory in how we have gotten from thinking that cancer was not treatable to where we are today, understanding that the big C cancer is certainly smaller. Let me start with the discovery that changed science. It's, many of you know, and probably studied in biology and have heard of Doctors Crick, Watson. But maybe some of you have not heard about Rosalind Franklin, who really was the major contributor to us understanding DNA. And by the way, when we think of this famous photo 51, what was so important about this breakthrough was that it was the very first time in humans' existence that we can study the nature of human cells. Prior to that, we were doing things in physics and engineering and agriculture and lots of other things, behaviors, but understanding the nature of human cells had not been done. And were it not for Doctors Crick, Watson, and Dr. Franklin, that breakthrough, or the lack of that breakthrough, would not have allowed us to be the benefactors of their research for decades since. What's happened since then? Well, what's happened since then, we've gotten lots of amazing scientists, not just Watson and Crick and Franklin, but people like James Allison and others who discovered, and David Baltimore, who discovered and things about, you know, how you can have spliced genes and how you can have reverse transcriptase and things like that, which then that basic fundamental science led to the development of translational sciences that developed and led to drugs that then got out to people. So in 1971, this is a famous picture on Nixon's War on Cancer that set the stage for the National Cancer Act. And since 1971, the big, bold idea then was to not only come up with a war on cancer, but eradicate cancer by 1981. Well, they were certainly ambitious. We may have missed the mark on eradicating cancer off the globe in 81, but we have certainly moved the needle. But that's not the story I want to tell you. The story that's missing from this picture, and the women that are missing from this picture, and particularly the woman that is responsible for having all those men get to the point of signing the National Cancer Act, is missing. Her name, by the way, is Mary Lasker. She was the catalyst behind Nixon. And, you know, she deserves all the credit for understanding that with all of the money coming through things like the American Cancer Society and all of the other donations and philanthropy that was being done, certainly she would go to Nixon that you could use those science and those scientists to reduce the burden of cancer. Luckily, Mary was such a force to be reckoned with that at some point through letter writing campaigns and other things, Nixon yielded and said, you know what? All right, Mary, you win. We will create this National Cancer Act that allows our scientists and places like the National Cancer Institute and universities to collaborate in a way and that would lead to what we now know are the national cancer centers across the country. That wasn't just President Nixon, that was Mary Lasker. Now listen, what is a cancer center and what's an NCI designated cancer center, you may ask, and why do we even care? While there are well over 5,000 cancer centers in the country, there are only 73 that have been federally designated as sites where we're bringing together universities and the power of the National Institutes of Health together so that we can come up with new science that leads to new discoveries and then deliveries of new miracle drugs that actually help us fight the war on cancer. The NCI designation is really an accreditation given to the most elite U.S. medical institutions, showing that they are leaders in addressing the nation's cancer burden through research. And in fact, I said there were well over 5,000 cancer centers of various sorts, but there's only 73 in the entire country, and Massey is one of those. Where we find, and what I enjoy, I get to do every day as a comprehensive cancer center, is not only do we think about research, but there is this wonderful intersection about taking all of the new knowledge we get into the clinic so that we can help people. And those are through clinical trials. I want you all to know that clinical trials are not these days so much an experimentation as they are the standard of care in the 21st century. What do I mean by that? I mean that when you've gone to the regular community docs and they have reached the standard of care, the standard of care is now access to clinical trials. And so my job here as Cancer Center Director here at VCU Massey, I take full accountability and responsibility and fun in not only developing new, innovative, cutting edge research that drives more new knowledge and new papers and new grants, but I take real immense joy in the ability of Massey over the last several years since 2020 to not only expand the number of clinical trials, but to expand the number of people who are being impacted and lives saved. It's really one of the most important things I think we've been able to do as a cancer center, and one of the things that I am eternally grateful for my team, but also for your help in getting the word out to people that Massey and UVA, but certainly Massey in this region, is one of those places that takes its comprehensive cancer care seriously, but also its role of being comprehensive cancer research and the combination of those together so that we can get those in real life to real people. It's been amazing these last 20 or so years. I mean, the amount of miracle medicines and technologies are coming out almost every day. We started back in the day of making the genome. Remember, we heard a lot that Francis Collins and many other people, the genome. We now have unlocked and understand that the genome, that is understanding even more about the genes and how they interact within our body, matter. By the way, the technology has been amazing. You can do things on your telephone right now, your cell phone right now, that we couldn't dream about, not even in Dick Tracy. But it's also led to really innovative approaches like the more and better use of artificial intelligence and machine learning. Now, when we think about artificial intelligence and machine learning, we act as if it only happened since Steve Jobs in the 90s. The truth of the matter is the artificial intelligence and machine learning movement has been around since certainly the late 50s and early 60s and well into the 70s. But it's visionaries, in a case like President Obama and others, in this case, also with Francis Collins and many other leaders in the science field, that understood how to harness this power in what we call precision medicine. That is, we have the genome, and now we have the ability to not just treat you with a single drug and hope you get better, but to design drugs that are specifically targeted for you as an individual to treat your specific cancer. We've certainly moved a lot. At Massey, I wanted to let you know that we've used all of your resources and every cent that we could on reinvesting back into science. And what I wanted you to know that we were getting top recruits here at Massey from places like MD Anderson, Memorial Sloan Kettering, Roswell Park, Stanford, Fred Hutch, University of California, San Francisco, and many other places because of your efforts. And I want to thank you personally. As a result of those efforts, we've been able to play with the big boys now. Our high impact publications have increased more than 200%. What does that mean? That means we are now publishing in the rates of the Temple Fox Chase, of the Lineberger Cancer Center of Duke, and many others, where we really have high impact publications in the top tier journals reflecting the work we've done here at VCU Massey. By the way, since I've come, with your help, we've been able to grow the program from one team science grant. It's great to have lots of really individual great scientists, but it's even better when they work together. We only had one team science grant, I think, in 2018, and when I arrived, and we now have a total of 8, and we're expecting a 9th. By the way, when people say, well, how much research is actually going on in Massey? I would say that since 2018, the amount of research right now is going like gangbusters. In fact, how do we tell? We have a metric called what types of money and how many grants do we get from the NCI, National Cancer Institute. That's called the direct cost of funding. That is, how much money is the NCI spending on us, and are we getting to do top tiered research? And the reality is, at this point, we are certainly in that top tier of cancer centers that are garnering the number of grants that warrants putting us in that space. I told you a minute ago that treatment interventional trials were not just for me, academic research, but the ability of, when people have no other hope, that we design trials that either give them hope that the drugs we've actually come up with work for you today or will work for someone else tomorrow. We put this year we didn't meet our goal of 360, but we put in over 320 patients this year onto giving them access to potentially these life-changing treatment trials. I'm saying all this to you because I want to set the stage for why I am both excited about the work that we have done, but also committed to the work that we need to do to have more women be healthy and without cancer. I'm going to take the next group of slides from a combination of American Cancer Society data and my own. I'll start with the fact that we all should feel better that since the high watermark of the 1990s, where both men and women were having very, very poor outcomes, we have in 2026 seen a 36% reduction in the deaths from cancer. Let me put that another way. We now have 36% more people attending weddings, birthday parties, bridal showers, graduations, not so much as a result of more people drinking carrot juice and eating kale, although that would be great, and getting more exercise. But what's in that is that the dreams of Mary Lasker, the work of Rosalind Franklin, many of those works and have been put together in this, embodied in this National Cancer Institutes like Massey, and as your national team working together with our academic centers, the NIH, and Big Pharma and other things, we've been able to reduce the burden of cancer in the last 30 years. Now, some of that, you may know, is because of prevention, and some of that is because we certainly have the technology to do better screening. But some of that is yet we have created from the basic science, foundational research. We've created exciting molecules that have over time become miracle medicines that are now accessible to many more people. I say that because everyone has benefited. All groups, independent of your race, have to some extent seen the benefit of the science. This is part of a report from the American Association of Cancer Research, in which I was very proud to sort of chair, that actually demonstrates that among all racial and ethnic groups, and we have been doing better, including to some extent rural communities. But I'd have to say that there are certain groups, rural and others, that have not seen the full benefit in a way that any of us would like to have seen. So let's talk about the number of new cases in the United States in 2026. This comes from data from Cancer Facts and Figures with some of my friends, Dr. Jamel and many other people, Robin Yarborough, who actually collect this data. And one of the fun things I get to do is in this, I am also part of the team that when we look at the data in the United States, and particularly as it relates to various different populations, I get every year to participate in that, and it makes me really happy. So let's talk about the number of new cases in women. The number of new cases in the United States for women, it still turns out that breast is number one. Surprisingly, lung cancer is number two. And as you can see on this screen, you have colorectal cancers, uterine cancers, and many of the other things. But when you think about that, it still says that when we talk about new cases, breast, lung, and colorectal are still the three top on the list that we have to pay top of mind. Let's look at the lifetime probability of developing cancers. Let's first look at men. It's roughly about 1 in 3. That had been 1 to 2, but with the latest data that has come out, we've seen some improvements in the overall life probability of men getting cancer. That has now gone from a firm 1 in 2 men to 1 in 3. But in women, the 1 in 3 that we had previously seen and I had previously cited, turns out that that 1 in 3 has not improved, not to the point that it's been noticeable. So as we talk about lifetime probability of developing cancer for men, there's certainly some progress that has been made, but for women, not so much. That's important to me because I think we as a group need to stay on top of things, just like Mary Lasker would have wanted us to do. When we think of breast cancer, it's probably the most common reason why people get new cancers. The reality is that the death from breast cancer, while certainly going down, interestingly enough, that trajectory is also slowing down in the context of keeping women from dying from breast cancer. It's something that we thought we were making great progress in since the 1990s. In fact, there was a 44% decrease from cancer mortality since the 1990s. But post-COVID, we saw almost an interesting upswing. We are certainly addressing that issue. And certainly we also think that some of that is coming now because we have women, what we call either early onset, or what we call AYs, young adults. That is from the 18 to 39 group, or which we'd call AY, young adults. And then in the early onset, it goes from 18 to 49. Both those groups are seeing, interestingly enough, increased trends in getting cancer. The why, we're still certainly trying to figure out. The research is ongoing. But I just wanted to let you know that cervical cancer, no woman should ever die from cervical cancer. Certainly, we are making great progress and will continue to do so. I think the ability to actually have screening and hopefully self-screening, which is now actually approved to do, will help us not only talk about declining rates of cervical cancer in women, but that cervical cancer is eradicated from the face of the planet. We do have some issues, though. When it comes to endometrial cancers, we have no idea about what's contributing to it. We think obesity may be playing a role, but we do know that endometrial cancer, though, is unfortunately still on the rise. Having said that, we talk about new cancers. Cancer incident rates, just look at it as new cancers. The trends since the 90s have certainly improved. Having said that, when we look at the trends among new cancers among men, it's clear to see that prostate cancer since the 1990s, specifically since 1993, the number one issue in the context of new cancers for men, turns out that that has been reduced by more than 50% in cancer deaths, and we'll get to that. You can see a increasing trend towards almost every other cancer, whether it's colon or lung, that for the most part, with the exception of skin cancers, most of the other cancers in men have been going down, or the new cases, which you can see can contribute to why now instead of 1 in 2 men, getting cancer in their lifetime, it's 1 in 3. Interestingly enough, as we discussed this before, the cancer rates of new cancer in women, however, that's not been the story. Interesting enough, there was a trend, and I really believe that the post-COVID era actually was a significant contributor to this. But you can see that while we were making some really good progress in reducing new cancer rates, or having women diagnosed with breast cancer was getting lower, I think that was because of some of the screening. Somewhere along the line, I don't know whether those efforts have actually been lessened, but the new rates of cancers for women has been going up. That was also true for lung cancer for women. As I think about new cancer rates between different communities, men versus women, by race and ethnicity, it still turns out that African Americans, Native Americans, and many other groups still have a higher rate of having new cancers. I think that we won't get into it today. I'm not sure that that's as much of a biological consequence as it is a consequence of where you live. That is, instead of your DNA, it is focused on your ZNA, which is your zip code neighborhood association. That's lots of work that we're doing here at Massey to tease out the importance of biology versus your zip code. Now let's turn to deaths. When you look at the number of cases of death from cancer, it remains that lung cancer still is number 1 for women. I know, surprise. The number 2 killer of women is breast, and unfortunately, number 3 is pancreas. And we are seeing both in men and women an uptick of pancreas cancers. Not quite certain why that is, but just like endometrial cancer, pancreas cancer is on the rise for women in the United States. What does this mean? What are our cancer death rates? Well, as I told you, for both men and women, they have improved, specifically substantially better since the 1990s. So you can take a little bit of a breath, and we will credit a little bit of success. We can tell you that the number of new cancers deaths that have been averted in both men and women have been in the positive trajectory. As you can see, the red line would be what would happen if we didn't have screening prevention, what would happen if we didn't get the new drugs, the new molecules to medicine drugs, what would happen if we didn't have, targeted therapy for breast cancer, what would happen if we didn't have any of that? Well, the red lines tell you that there would be substantially more deaths for both men and women. But what I can tell you is that among men, while we have made substantial progress, particularly in lung cancer, as you can see here, and other cancers like GI cancers, and believe it or not, prostate cancer, we're making good strides, which we all should be celebrating. But when it comes to women, we can do better. As we look at lung cancer rates in women, it's going up. Uterine cancer in women since the 1970s, for some reason, going up. And as I previously talked about, we have an ability, I think, in the context of breast, while we had an upswing overall, I think that there's more attention to be paid in breast cancer, particularly breast cancer in young women. Again, when we break this down in the context of communities, we know that women who are African American tend to actually have, again, and women from tribal nations tend to have worse outcomes with their cancers. These things are important. So we talked about new cases. That is, someone says, I feel fine, they go into the doctor, or I'm not feeling fine, they go into the doctor and says, oh my God, I now have cancers. That setting says that we're doing, certainly those rates of new cancers have gone down for men, maybe some of the screening. Interesting enough, I would say overall, it would be fair to say, not to scare anyone, that while things aren't ridiculously bad in the context of new cancer cases for women, they're flat. When we look at as we just summed up the number of deaths, overall, we're doing better as a country. 36% fewer people were dying from cancer. That's something to celebrate. But that's when you take us all. When you start breaking down and looking under the hood at individual groups, I still think that there is certainly some room for improvement in the context of our women in the United States, in the context of detecting their cancer early, preventing their cancer, or having very good treatments for that. Now listen, what happens once you get cancer? Are our treatments any good? So this looks at the 5-year survival rate. That is, you get the diagnosis, and then 5 years later, are you still here on the planet? Personally, I'd have a better sort of setup than just, are you alive in the 5 years? I hope one day we will get from a 5-year relative survival rate to a 5-year rate of thriving. Another conversation for another day, though. As you can see by this table, since the 70s, women who are diagnosed with breast cancer who get treatments, actually the percentage who survive for 5 years or more is certainly substantially better. The interesting thing is, as you go through things like, in this case, I want to take ovarian cancer, we certainly are making some progress since the 70s. So all is not lost. I think it's simply that we cannot afford to take our eye off the prize when it comes to being able to not just eradicate cancer, but certainly reduce the burden of cancer in women. We have some opportunities. This is just a 5-year survival rate that says, what if you come in and what percentage of people are still alive after you've been diagnosed with advanced stage cancer? Well, given the many, many, many new therapies that we have, that has been developed, not only because of government funding, but also because of your philanthropic dollars, things like immunotherapy and molecular targeted therapy. So now when someone comes in, when I was much younger, a clinician, I used to always say when people come in with advanced stage or metastatic disease, I used to have to get prepared to say, we don't have much to offer you other than how do I keep you comfortable? Since my early days as a clinician till now, that has radically changed. Interestingly enough, even when women walk in with stage 4 cancer or stage 4 lung cancer, I'm not saying it's perfect, but I'm saying we do offer much more hope now than we did back in the 90s, the 80s, and the 70s. When we look at all comers, we know that advanced stage people who present to doctors and clinics with advanced stage cancer, we've doubled the survival since the 90s. But we still have more work to go. So as we look at the 5-year survival rates across communities, we know that there are some differences. Again, this is just, and if we look at rural communities, you would see similar numbers. We have work to do, people. I say that in rural communities because it turns out that if you were a 58-year-old woman with a triple negative breast cancer diagnosis, and you happen to be in the state of Massachusetts, and you happen to be in the city of Boston, it turns out that your outcome is 3 times better than if you were the same age woman, same stage of cancer, and just happened to be growing up in Shreveport, Louisiana, or Beattyville, Kentucky. It turns out that one of the growing groups that are not benefiting as much from the science are men and women that live in rural areas. Particularly interest to me are areas nearby, like West Virginia. And in fact, as I look at this map and hope you get an appreciation for this map, I think the growing sentiment in science is that your biology is important. Certainly we have mutations of cancers, EGFR, BRCA mutations, which some of you are familiar with. But it turns out that beyond the DNA, that ZNA, that zip code neighborhood association, becomes even more important with newer data. The hope is that Massey will not only be able to come up with a miracle molecule that becomes a miracle medicine, thanks to people like Saeed Septi and his M2M program, but the next phase of this is, can we actually reduce the burdens of cancers in those areas like Kentucky, like West Virginia, like real areas in Virginia that I'll show you in a minute, which the penetration of our science is not fully being realized in some of those areas. I wanted to do this because I wanted to end with the last couple slides and letting you know that while places like Louisiana and Arkansas and West Virginia actually are not doing so well compared to places when you compare them to Massachusetts, Boston, and some other areas. But I want to tell you that there's a disparity within even Virginia. When I look across all 3,100 US counties, that is, you look at all the counties in the United States, there are counties and localities within Virginia that are in the highest rates of new cancers in the country for women. In fact, we have places that the numbers, like in Gallic City, Rappahannock, Fairfax, London, Brunswick, in which our rates of having cancers, Portsmouth, in those areas, our rates of having cancers, new cancers diagnosed, is higher than they are in the rest of the United States. By the way, what really matters is, yes, new cancers. That's scary. But the ultimate test is what happens from cancer deaths. And again, we have some reason to have some concern in our Commonwealth, and particularly for us in the Richmond and greater Richmond area, because again, when you look at all of the 3,100 US counties in the United States, unfortunately, we have places like Fairfax City, Culpeper County, Petersburg City, Harrisburg City, that are have some of the top worst outcomes of cancer death, not just in Virginia, but in the country. This says to me that we certainly are doing better than some states. We're certainly doing better, I think, overall than Arkansas, certainly better overall than West Virginia, certainly better overall than Mississippi and Louisiana. But I have to be honest with you. That's not good enough for me. The women within the Commonwealth should be in that range of best outcomes, like women that happen to live in Boston, Massachusetts. I think we have work to do within the Commonwealth. And I hope that you agree with me that while we have certainly made progress, and we should recognize the fact that we have made progress. I was joking the other day that I really am getting down on people who just talk about cancer and there's nothing you can do about it. That's not true. 50% more men are dying from prostate. 44% more women are dying less from breast cancer. We can go on and on. So we are certainly making progress. But like everything in progress, it doesn't all happen at once. And what I'm pointing out to you is that in the Commonwealth of Virginia, while we have made substantial progress, 36%, 34% fewer people dying in the state, in the Commonwealth of Virginia, over the last 30 years from cancer, we still have pockets in which we have work to do. I want to tell you one story about why I think the work that you do and why events like the one you're having today matter. And this is we started with the fact that there were strong women behind the science and strong women behind some of the policies and some of the that were involved with the National Cancer Act. I want to also end with a couple very strong women that have been important to Massey Comprehensive Cancer Center. By the way, we had, for example, interestingly enough, I go out in the community, and by going out in the community and directly involving myself in some of what they have to say, it turned out that 3 women brought to my attention that we were not doing enough about endometrial cancer. Surprising to me when I heard that, because I was like, well, is endometrial cancer a real problem? At that time, we had Dr. Leslie Randall, and I actually brought this information to her, and she said, Dr. Winn, how did you know? Not only is there increasing rates, I'm seeing really aggressive forms of cancer and endometrial cancer in women, and we don't even have a therapy. I then went to Dr. Catherine Tosis and sort of said, well, how's the epidemiology? Are we just sort of seeing a handful of cases? And she looked and she saw that in Virginia, there was increasing numbers of endometrial cancer. So what do? We got our best scientists, our best clinicians, our best cancer epidemiologists together, and they formed a team that looked at endometrial cancer. Not to belabor the point, what came out of that was a study that looked at creating a new drug or a combination therapy for women with endometrial cancer. That happened here at Massey. I want to let you know that we have things like cancer service lines. And we have, again, amazing leadership from people like Dr. Candace McGuire and also David. But Candace McGuire is our senior vice president of our service line. What is a service line? The simple explanation is it's a way in which you have a leader that gets all the people talking and being aligned about how to make cancer care more efficient, more effective, and easier to get. I owe a debt of gratitude to Dr. McGuire. And last but not least, I want to give a shout out to Dr. Hong, who is going to pitch it for me while I am actually on this plane going to the Grand Challenge for the UK, by the way, which is a wonderful program, which has been a partnership between the NIH, National Cancer Institute, and Britain, and all of England and all of Britain to come together to have both countries solve really big problems. I can't believe that I was picked to be part of this illustrious team. with the Cancer Grand Challenge, but it has been an honor, and it's the reason why I'm not with you today. But I am going to leave you in the good hands of Dr. Susan Hong, who is also, she won't say it, but a game changer. She's literally changing outcomes because she recognized that while there may be more people living with cancer than dying from cancer, we also need to be thinking about not just the next molecule that'll become the miracle medicine to treat the cancers, but how do we make sure that people are not just surviving, but thriving? What are the new interventions that come out of a laboratory that allows people to have less issues with brain fog or less poor outcomes because the same medicines we use to treat you are now, unfortunately, having untoward effects in your heart? Dr. Hong is a giant in the field, although she will not say that about herself, but I will. I want to thank Dr. Hong for being with you today and being able to help with the question and answer sessions. I wish I were there, but I believe that as we started this talk, that there are women who are just giants in the field. I'm going to end this talk with that there are women who are giants in the field. And one of them is with you today. Again, I want to thank you for the invite. I want to thank you for just your support over the years. I want to thank you for your support of me. I most of all want to thank you for your support of Massey and your challenge to Massey to continue to do better science, to continue to deliver better health care so that we save more lives. And with that, I'll say thank you. And just again, wish I could be with you, but hopefully I will have the opportunity to see you again. Take care.
So I'm Dr. Susan Hong. I'm the Director of Cancer Survivorship at VCU Massey. I actually was recruited here from Chicago, where I ran 2 other cancer survivorship programs. And what I love about Massey is that it really is a holistic, patient-centered approach. And while, basic science is really important and everybody talks about molecules to medicine, we really have to make sure that we take care of the whole patient. So we define survivorship from the time of diagnosis, really until somebody says, I really don't want to see you anymore. So I want to take questions or happy to hear comments. So cancer survivorship began really in the 1980s to take care of adult survivors of childhood cancers. So child would get diagnosed with cancer, they get cured, and then they'd be 30 years old and have no idea what happened to them. And so in the pediatric realm, they developed these long-term follow-up clinics to address some of the long-term health issues. And then in the 80s and 90s, we started looking at the health impacts of cancer on adult survivors, so adults diagnosed with cancer. And so in 2005, 2006, the Institute of Medicine published this very large report talking about the challenges that cancer survivors face and how we need comprehensive programs to address these challenges. And that's what a survivorship program is. And it's gone through different iterations and models, but really, survivorship is defined as from the time you're diagnosed until the end of your life. And it really looks at the whole person and how cancer impacts your other health issues and impacts your life, your family, and some of the treatment-related complications. And the purpose of this is to really minimize the long-term adverse effects of cancer treatment, reduce your risk of cancer recurrence, possibly prevent other cancers from happening, and to make sure that you're getting sort of that holistic long-term follow-up. Because, as you know, in the US, we look at people like pieces of Lego blocks, where everybody goes to one specialty who doesn't talk to another specialty, who doesn't talk to another. And that's not how the human body works, right? And so I sort of define our program as We try to deal with everything, and if we don't know the answer, we'll help you find it with somebody else.
Okay. Hi, my question, I'm right here. Right here. My question is, I think I was mistakenly thinking that the BRCA gene, that it was mainly Jewish women needed to be tested, but my understanding is that African American women also should get tested. Could you talk a little bit about the importance of that?
Yeah, oh, sorry. Yes. She was asking specifically about the BRCA gene. So BRCA1, BRCA2 originally has been associated with the breast ovarian cancer syndrome gene. And it was first really isolated in the 90s by Mary Clara King, and typically associated with Jewish women, but it's actually much more common among many different racial ethnic groups, including African American women. And so now the recommendations about who gets tested for a genetic mutation, what that means is it's changes to your DNA that increase your chances of developing cancer. We have some guidelines. Basically, all women, regardless of age, who are diagnosed with breast cancer should really consider undergoing genetic testing. Certainly, anybody who has a family history of multiple cancers in multiple generations should undergo testing. Anybody with pancreatic cancer, anybody with prostate cancer. There are certain guidelines, but really we're now doing pretty universal genetic testing. And the genetic testing is helpful because in some cases it can target treatment. So certain mutations respond better to certain types of therapy. So like ovarian cancer with a BRCA mutation responds really well to PARP inhibitors. It also helps us figure out what additional specialized high-risk screenings you need so that we can make sure that you're getting the surveillance necessary so that we can pick up cancer at the very earliest stages. Oh, and then, Beyonce's father has the BRCA mutation. It's sort of, I bring that example up.
Should I be retested now?
Yeah,
I'm getting
so-
this question from my granddaughters and my nieces and
So
nephews.
back in 2000, so genetic testing. So there are hundreds and hundreds of mutations associated with BRCA, and I think around 2011, 12 is when they did something called BART, which is so the way the genetics testing happened was they would look at point by point by point by point by point, and it would identify small mutational changes, but not big mutational changes. And so some of the BRCA mutations are due to very large breakpoint rearrangements. And so the only type of testing that would pick that up is called BART. And that was really introduced later, like in 2010, 2011. So we always recommend updated testing for individuals. Sorry.
Within the last couple of weeks, there's been a lot in the news about changes in the thinking, based on data, I'm assuming, of hormone replacement for women. And I wondered if that extended to women with a history of breast cancer.
So that's a really good question. And I can tell you there is no consensus, okay? So there are cancer specialists who say if you've ever had estrogen or progesterone sensitive cancer, you can never go anywhere near hormone replacement, okay? And then there are cancer specialists who are still considered big names in the field who say after 5 years or after 10 years you can consider low dose. Ultimately, it's really your quality of life, right? And so I have had, if you're, nobody else lives in your body and you have to decide what you're comfortable, what risks you're able to tolerate. And so for some women, their quality of life is so poor without hormone replacement, they can't function. I've had patients like that who say, yes, I understand every single person I know has had breast cancer. I don't care. I can't think. I can't work. I can't live like this. I need to be on hormone replacement. That's a personal choice.
Quick question. Some of the data that you showed earlier indicates that lung cancer is on the increase for women and that the mortality rates are increasing as well, so the outcomes are not as good. What are some of the factors you all think are influencing that, especially since smoking has declined over the years among women? It's odd to me that this is increasing, and could it be from early exposure to
Yeah, I
homes
mean,
with smoke?
we know a portion of women get diagnosed with lung cancer who have never, ever smoked. And we're not really able to quantify secondhand smoke and how that, because many people who are now in their 70s grew up in a household where their parents or grandparents smoked. So, so we know that that probably is a risk factor, but we don't know how to quantify that. Also, you know, even though we actually have screening protocols for lung cancer, women are still being under-screened. It's not like getting a mammogram where you get this whole. So if you have a 20-pack year history of smoking, you should undergo low-dose CT, which is the screening test for lung cancer. And less women are screened than men, which means that they get diagnosed at more advanced stages. More advanced stages tend to be much harder to treat.
I was first diagnosed with cancer and with no history in the family at 48. And this was back in 1998. And at that point, they were saying it was 1 in 8 women. Now you're saying it's 1 in 3. And I had my second diagnosis 10 years to the week of my first one, and ended up having, and I had breast cancer, and I ended up having a bilateral mastectomy. And since then I've been great. And had the I was tested for the BRCA gene, and I do not carry it. I have 2 daughters, and my sister-in-law did test for it, and she has it. So my girls still have to be very careful.
So, okay, I'm sorry to ask you these personal questions.
No,
You don't
no.
have to answer. Did you have more than just the BRCA testing? Because you should undergo panel testing because it's more than just BRCA that increases your risk for breast cancer.
I don't know.
Okay, so that's important, and so it's, even though you've had genetic testing in the past, it's really important to make sure that you have updated testing if you need it, because there's PALB2 and there's ATM and there's check mutation. There's lots of other mutations that are associated, so your first breast cancer at 48. So I mean, if you were ever born with an organ, then there's always that risk, irrespective of family history or not. And that's the unfortunate reality of our life, right? And so, yes, we worry more about people with a family history, but that doesn't mean that that's the only determination.
Thank you. What about the 1 in 8 back then and the 1 in 3 now?
So the 1 in 3 refers to like total lifetime risk of any cancer, okay, as opposed to just breast cancer.
All right.